Welcome to Curiously Kaitlyn, where we take a kid question about God, theology, or the Bible and find a scholar to answer it. This week, we are once again thinking about creation and new creation, but instead of thinking about how we will live in new creation, we're thinking about how God lived before creation. Lots of theologians have spent time wondering, what was God doing before he made everything? Does it even make sense to say there was a before creation when God created time itself? Was God sitting around for all eternity doing nothing and then randomly decided to make something? And if that's what happened, why? Today's kid question gets into some territory that might make your brain hurt, but it also points us towards incredible truths about the freedom we have to respond to God's freely given love.
I don't know. That doesn't make any sense.
Curiously Kaitlyn.
Clayton Keenon, thank you so much for joining me
Oh,
today.
I'm so happy to be here. This is wonderful.
This is Clayton Keenon. He is lead teaching pastor at Christ Community Church in St. Charles, Illinois, and host of the Bible Savvy podcast, a weekly conversation on how to understand, enjoy, and apply God's Word. This is a strange one because people who watch this online and see the video will know that I am weirdly not at the Holy Post studio. You are at the Holy Post studio, so I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, I live locally, and I thought it'd be fun to come down.
Yeah, that's great. So let's hear our kid question today.
My question is, when God created us, if he was here for eternity, he must have been really bored before those 7 days of creation.
Ooh,
That's
okay.
a good question.
Clayton, before we get to your answer, well, there's like pieces of this we can address. What's just your first impression when you hear that question? Like, what do you think when you hear a kid ask that?
It is such a good question. I've had adults ask me this question, so I feel like it's one that's very natural, because I think it's hard for us to imagine anything that's before the world, and anything that's forever is just really difficult. And part of our experience of waiting for something, is it like you start to think, well, if I was by myself for a long time, how would I feel? So it seems totally normal, totally natural. I've had my children and children in my church ask this, so not surprising at all. Really good question.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's kind of like the TV shows that we watch or the books we read where like they'll come out later with like, oh, there was this like prelude to all of this. Here's the backstory.
Yeah.
Here's that. And we're looking for like, what else is going on besides the story that we're told? So
Yes.
what is just like first answer before we get into some of the details? Let's just start with, was God bored before creation?
I think the answer is no, but how you get there is the more interesting part.
Yeah.
Because I actually come at it not thinking first about God, but thinking about boredom. Because we're talking about a very specific kind of thing, and there's a reason we experience boredom. Now, when I think of, and again, this comes from like, if I was imagining God kind of as like a person by himself, and I'm thinking, what if I was by myself? My thought is boredom happens when there's not a lot of activity. And so I'm thinking, I got to go find something to do. I need to, there's got to be some stimulation, that sort of thing. And so that's when I get bored. But I thought about it a little bit longer, and I thought, I think boredom happens more often, or the times when I'm least bored, I should say, are not when I'm doing a whole lot of things, but when I'm with somebody who is very interesting, or I'm with someone that I love very much. So I think about times when I have been sitting around in a living room, and it's simply the company that I'm keeping that makes it so that I can sit there for hours and not get bored. When in the same room, if those people were not there, I would get restless and bored. So I thought boredom is not exactly having a lot of things going on. It's about connection and attention and engaging with someone. So that leads to the thoughts about God, which are God was not actually alone before the world began. And that's the big theological shift here, is that God is the Trinity.
Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I think this kid is probably imagining, like if I try and think of eternity prior to creation, I just think nothingness, blackness everywhere, and then one lone God floating around and just sort of being like, what's happening around here? We've talked about the Trinity a bunch on the show, and we've talked about some of the like complicated language that we use to talk about the Trinity. But I don't know that we've said very much about like what that means for who God is in terms of how God is different than us relationally. Like what is happening in the Trinity amongst the persons. We've had some episodes where we've said, okay, persons is a good phrase to use. And we've talked about the relation between the Son, the Spirit, the Father. But I don't think we've touched on anything that would help us answer, like, God was not alone in the beginning.
Yeah. And there are a lot of technicalities about this that end up, you can go really, really deep on what the kind of nature of each person of the Trinity, their experience, and there's debates between different views of these things. But, theologians have essentially said, if God is love, then you begin with a community of persons that are deeply committed to each other.
Just as a reminder, the language Clayton uses here is really important, even if it sounds wonky grammatically. He didn't say that the Trinity was made up of 3 people in community. He said persons. If we say that there were 3 people in community, that sounds like we worship 3 gods who just happen to like to hang out together. But the early church settled on the language of persons for the Father, Son, and Spirit. A way to say that they are distinct. The Father is not the Son is not the Spirit is not the Father, but to also not say that they are different substances. The Father is God, the Son is God, the Spirit is God. If you want to remember how some of this all fits together, you can go back to the episode we did with Fred Sanders on if God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are the same person.
And there is a sense of delight in each other that is there. So the Father engages with the Son. And when we see, when Jesus is baptized and we hear the voice of the Father saying, "This is my Son whom I love, in him I am well pleased," there's a whole lot loaded in there, but at least one of the layers is that from all eternity, when the Father looked at the Son, he said, "Wow, this is amazing." And so, and theologians get into like, okay, so how does it relate between the Father, the Son, the Spirit, and what does it mean for Jesus to be kind of like the Word of God, and maybe the Spirit is kind of the love between the Father and the Son, and so on. And those things get, again, you kind of go down these trails and it gets complicated. But I think at the heart of it is God was not sitting there solitary, thinking thoughts. He was engaged, the Father with the Son and the Spirit, and that is a real community.
Yeah, it's wild for us to, this is one of the central kind of problems or difficulties of Christian theology is that like we experience God as God relates to the world, but we have all these questions about what is going on within God that feel really, almost entirely inaccessible to us, even though we have, like you've described, some of these scriptural images. It's really hard for us to imagine as creatures, as humans, like what's going on there. So we're probably thinking like, I don't know, I've had 2 friends and I can't imagine all of eternity
forever.
Just hanging out and being good. I want us to talk a little bit more about the boredom part in a minute, but first, so part of what I think probably people are hearing is like, okay, God's not bored, God's not alone throughout this. But I think even in the kids' question, a little bit of the question is sort of like, I'm assuming that's what sparked creation. God is alone,
yes.
bored, and maybe even, this kid doesn't ask this, but I've heard a lot of people say things along these lines. I think there's even like kind of a popular worship song that sort of says something like this. That's just sort of like, God didn't want to be alone. And so God created us to almost, we don't always say this quite explicitly, but some of the questions almost say God needed something else. And so God made something, either to not be bored or to not be alone, but God created for that reason. So if God was not bored, why create anything?
Yeah. And this is actually where I think the question goes from something you might be curious about, what's it like to be God? Does he get bored? To something that really, really impacts us. Because if we think of God as needing something from us, it really warps the way we relate to God. So in the ancient world, if they thought about their gods as limited and having needs, it made it so that those gods would make demands on their followers that they had to meet. You got to feed me. You need to provide entertainment for me. You need to, do things for me that make me feel okay, or fill me up in some way, which would not be the case for the true God. Our God does not need us to do something for him, which means whatever God is doing, it is gracious towards us because we need him, not because he needs us. And so that's really, really important that we don't say he was so lonely that we need to be good friends to him, right?
Yeah.
So that isn't the motive for him making the world. But the question is, what is the motive, right? If God doesn't need us, why did he make us? And I think it's actually the opposite. Like it's almost by saying God is so delighted in his experience between the Father, Son, and Spirit. As amazing as that is, it's almost like they're at a party and they're looking at each other. And this is one of those metaphors. Some people are going to be like, well, theological,
sure.
whatever.
Not perfect.
Not perfect. But if you think this is so much fun, we should invite some people over, right? Like there's something about not being bored, so you call up a friend, but having so much fun, you say, other people should experience this. Well, the only way there's other people to experience it is for God to make people. And the reason God made the world was not out of deficiency, but out of overflow. I think Jonathan Edwards has a line that says, it's expected that a fountain will overflow. Like it's so full of water that it spills over. That makes sense. We don't say, man, it's really just lacking in water. We say, no, it's so full that it spills over. And so to say that God would say, this is so wonderful, let's choose to make people make a world and invite that world, those people into this experience is really, really cool, which means God, his love overflows to us rather than him saying, could you give me some love that I'm lacking, which is so cool.
And now a word from our sponsor. Wait, what's a sponsor?
This episode of Curiously Kaitlyn is sponsored by Hiya Health. If you care about your kids learning better theology, you probably care about their health too. And typical children's vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk. That's why Hiya was created, the pediatrician-approved superpowered chewable vitamin. Hiya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full-body nourishment kids need with a yummy taste they love. Formulated with the help of nutritional experts, Hiya is pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies, then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D, B12, C, zinc, folate, and many others, to help support immunity, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, teeth, bones, and more. Plus, it's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else you can imagine. Hiya is designed for kids 2 and up and sent straight to your door, so parents have one less thing to worry about. I don't have kids, but I have tasted Hiya vitamins, and they taste great. Plus, they come in a cute reusable container kids can decorate with stickers. I also recommend checking out their new Kids Probiotic and Nighttime Essentials. We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin, where you can receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/curiously. This deal is not available on their regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/curiously and get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. Sleep is so important to me. And when you've been in grad school for as long as I have, you aren't always sleeping on the most comfortable beds. Which is why it's been so amazing to sleep on Brooklyn Bedding's Aurora Luxe cooling bed. It's incredibly comfortable, such high quality, and surprisingly affordable. Brooklyn Bedding has tons of options with something for everyone. Different firmness options, heights, and dimensions to fit right into your lifestyle. And Brooklyn Bedding has been around for over 25 years, known for top-of-the-line comfort and quality without the luxury price tag. Plus, you can try out some sleep on your Brooklyn Bedding mattress for up to 120 nights. And if you don't love it as much as I do, they'll help you return it or pick out a different one. Go to brooklynbedding.com and use my promo code Kaitlyn at checkout to get 30% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. Go to brooklynbedding.com and use my promo code Kaitlyn at checkout to get 30% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's brooklynbedding.com and use my promo code Kaitlyn for 30% off site-wide. brooklynbedding.com, promo code Kaitlyn. Yeah, I want to get into this in a minute, but like, yeah, that changes how we relate to God. Like our gifts to God, like to your point about, ancient perceptions of the gods, isn't something that's like we're providing something God needs. There's like a reciprocal transactional kind of thing here. It's like when we give things to God, it's like free joy as well. It's like returning free joy for free joy of like, I'm not giving you something you need. I'm giving something to you because I love you and I want to. And but before we get to that, one other thing I'm thinking as you're describing this is, okay, God's not bored. And so that's not the reason God creates everything. But I also wonder if a kid might be going, okay, like I can imagine God being bored without anything. But I've also heard that God knows everything and like can be everywhere and can see everything. So even though God made so much cool stuff, couldn't God also just get bored with all the cool stuff God made? He knows all of it. I'm not bored sometimes. I mean, I'm bored all the time for other reasons. But like if I could travel to all the amazing things on Earth, that wouldn't be boring to me, but God already knows all of it. So could I imagine a kid also could just ask like, but doesn't God get bored with the things he made too?
Yeah, there is a lot in there that's just about the difference between our experience and God's experience. And some things about God's experience we cannot grasp. We can kind of think towards, but we can't internalize very well. I think some of it is we are limited. So for us, novelty and newness is something that stimulates us and makes us excited. And in some ways, boredom is God's gift to say, go and learn those new things and explore those new things. But God, so part of it is that he doesn't just know everything. He also values everything the way it should be valued.
One of my favorite philosophers, Iris Murdoch, defined attention as a just and loving gaze. We finite and fallen humans struggle to pay attention to the right things in a way that God doesn't, because he has a perfectly just and perfectly loving gaze, things that are worthy of that attention.
So when he thinks about something, it doesn't wear off for him that it's amazing, right? So we eat a piece of food and we say, that's so delicious. Well, after a while, if you eat that food again and again, we wear out on it. God doesn't wear out. G.K. Chesterton, he talks about how it could be that every time the sun rises, it's because God was like, let's do it again. Because after billions and billions of times, he never got bored of it, but we do. And so it's because he says a sunrise is always amazing. Another sunrise doesn't make it less amazing, right?
Yeah.
And so part of it is our limited nature to be able to continue to value and love and cherish things. And God never wears out on that. He always thinks it's amazing.
That's so helpful. I don't know if it's G.K. Chesterton or somewhere else I heard this idea that there's almost like a childlikeness or like something that children do that we can learn about God, where like they don't ever get tired of being pushed on the swing. Or sometimes we get frustrated because they want us to do the same joke or the same thing over and over and over again.
It's so many times when I'm telling my kids, okay, once was funny, twice was okay, but okay, you need to stop. Right. But they love it. Yeah, you want to hear the same book, the same story over and over again.
Yeah.
God's like that, I think.
Yeah, it's still beautiful, even if it's the 100th time. Let's talk a little bit about what all of this means for how we relate to God. Yeah. Because I can imagine, part of this is just like the hypothetical interesting question of like, okay, well, was God bored? But as you pointed out in your answers, like there's all of so much of the answer tells us both about how we are different from God and why God created and out of what God created. How do you think any of this, if we rightly understand it, should just change how we think about our relationship to God or how we worship God?
All right. So I think that there are kind of two basic postures that people throughout time and history in different parts of your life, you take a posture towards God. One is saying, I need to do all these things for God. And there's another posture that says, what I'm doing is receiving and experiencing something that God is giving to me. Now, there's things that we talk sometimes, like I'm serving God or I'm doing these things. But if our internal posture and disposition is, God really needs me, he's making demands and he's going to be really upset because he's not going to have whatever. And I'm there is a weight that goes on that. Yeah. That is truly unbearable. Maybe for a short amount of time you can maintain that, but over the long haul, it will crush you, and it will make your relationship with God something that slips away from love and joy and gratitude in serving him. It would become something that is frankly, slavery, and not in the positive way that metaphor sometimes comes up in the Bible. It becomes something where we say, I can't keep doing this. I can't bear this burden. But if we think of God as someone who is overflowing with joy and love and all of these things, and the reason he made us and the reason he saves us is so that we experience those things, then all of the participation becomes something that is much more free. It becomes something that you're doing with God. It becomes something that you're doing almost empowered by God, as opposed to kind of sucking you dry. It's filling you up. And so the idea that we come as people who actually have the needs, we might be bored. We might need something. And God's saying, you know what? I'm not. I got a lot of exciting things going on. Being with me is going to be amazing. Come on in. There's just a different attitude to that. It changes so many things.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Another question that this kid did not ask, but I wonder if someone might be thinking, in part because so many of the episodes we've done on this show, we've talked about creation, and we've also talked about new creation. And like, where does the story start and where does the story end? And I wonder if there's anything you want to say about new creation in relationship to this. Like, similarly to what I asked before of like, oh, well, God could just get bored with creation as he made it. Someone might say, like, I don't know, have you read the Bible? Like, humans keep doing wild stuff. Like, he's not getting bored because we just keep messing it up. In eternity, there's this reconciliation, this redemption. Like, what does everything we've learned so far about why God is not bored? What might that say about new creation too? Yeah.
So I was asked this question by someone recently in a kind of a different form. They were someone who said, I love art and story and all of these things that are like, one of the things that's richest in life are these things, but they are driven by tension, conflict, these sorts of things, which seem to go away in the new creation. And so will there be good stories to tell, right? Like, are we only going to be able to tell the ones where there was evil and brokenness and sin and somehow, good came out of it from this creation, but the new creation not going to be generating anything new. I think that's along the same lines of boredom, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's no problems to solve, no whatever. And so it took me a long time thinking about that one, because it's really, really good, and kind of made me sad, because I was like, I want more new stories. Like, that seems to be something the new creation should have. And so then I realized this, for us as human beings who are limited, and frankly will still be limited in the new creation, where we will not be omnipresent. Our bodies will be in one place. That doesn't mean in the new creation, all will be so easy and perfect. Well, let me get this right. The new creation will be perfect, but it doesn't mean that there will be nothing new to learn or to make or to discover. I fully expect that there are going to be places where God says, hey, go explore this new thing or discover this new thing you didn't know about my world. It's still out there to figure out, in the same way the first human beings before the fall would have been expected to do that.
I've said it before, and I will say it again. I fully expect to study theology in eternity. We will have endless new things to learn about God.
So I think for us as human beings, God will never run out of new, interesting, amazing things. I also think one way we will become more like God, one thing that will be perfected in us, is that our love will be perfect, which means, like God, who says, I always think this flower is amazing. I always think the sunset is amazing. This never wears out for me. I think we will have a strength of will and desire and affection for things that will not wear out. And we will continually be able to say, you know what? Every time I spend time with this person in the new creation, I love being with them. It's always fun. Every time I hear that song, it's still beautiful. Like, I think that will be something that will be transformed in us. And God already has it, but he's going to give that to us.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Clayton, we always ask this question last. Imagine you're at church and a small child, maybe this age, maybe younger, comes up to you and says, was God bored before creation? What would your kind of kid level answer to them be?
I was like, that is an incredible question. It's so good. You're thinking so hard about this. And I love that you're asking these questions. It's interesting. I get bored sometimes. I'm sure you do. And sometimes when we're bored, we think, I got to go find something new. But I want you to think about a time when you have been hanging out with people that you just love, people that you enjoy and you think are interesting. Maybe it's a family member, a brother or sister, or a friend, or someone that you just like being around. And have you ever just spent like a whole afternoon or a whole day just being with that person? And you don't really get bored with them because you just like being with them. Well, here's the thing about God. God was not alone before he made the world. God was the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He was 3 persons, one God. Now, I know that's going to raise some other questions, but God, the Father, was with God the Son. And guess what? Every time God the Father looked at the Son, he said, wow, you are amazing. I love being with you. And the Son did the same for the Father, and the Spirit for the Son and the Father. And so God, being a community, was not bored. He was actually so excited that he said, you know what would be amazing? What if we made some other people to come not be bored with us, some other people to enjoy this good thing? And that's actually why he made the world. He wasn't so bored that he made you. He was so excited that he made you and wants you to be a part of this. So that's the really cool thing. So every time when you get bored about something, a great thing to do is to actually talk to God about it and say, show me something else that's amazing about you or about your world or something new, because he's got lots more to show you.
Oh, that is so good. And I love what you just said, too, of like, this is the start of a conversation. You give one answer, it prompts more questions.
Oh,
That's really beautiful and amazing. So, Clayton, thank you so much for taking this question really seriously with me.
Thanks for letting me do it.
I've said it before, and I will say it again. I fully expect to study theology in eternity. We will have endless new things to learn about God. I loved how Clayton kept taking us back to who God is. Our confusion about this question partially stems from not understanding God's character. We forget that God wasn't alone before he created us. We forget that he doesn't need anything from us, but loves us freely. We forget that while our attention spans are limited and we get easily bored and distracted and listless, God does not. I'm going to end by reading the full G.K. Chesterton quote Clayton and I both referenced. Its language is a little old-fashioned or maybe academic sounding, but it's also beautiful. Chesterton is describing for us how God is like children. How children show us something of what it means to enjoy things fully, to delight in the everyday, in the way that God does. Slow it down and listen to it a few times if you want, because even though it's a little wordy, it tells us something beautifully true about God. This is what G.K. Chesterton says. Because children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free, therefore they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, do it again, and the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony. But perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It's possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun, and every evening, do it again to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but has never gotten tired of making them. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy. For we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we. Curiously Kaitlyn is a production of Holy Post Media. Produced by Mike Stralo. Editing by Seth Gorvet. Theme song by Phil Vischer. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a review so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus cute kids, and never any butt news.